The fact is, not everyone is going to love them. Not everyone is going to like them, in the same way that not everyone is going to like us. And the other truth is, rejection is inevitable. Hello, Nathan. Thank you for your submission to Bleep. We're sorry to convey that we've decided to pass on your submission at this time. Dear Nathan, unfortunately each issue contains limited space. We have to pass on it, we only have a small thank you so much and endeavour involved at this Nathan Bleep, so we must decline. Thank you so much. Although we genuinely appreciate dear Nathan Hassall the chance to consent you so much for sending your we've chosen to unfortunately rejection of this although we greatly however, if you have salvation, we often have to decline fantastic pieces of writing. We would love to read more from you in the future. Rejections. They're an inevitable part of the poet's journey. Not just new poets get them, but seasoned, well-known professional poets also receive them. The fact is, not all poems work for every editor. One editor may have a particular liking to an aesthetic and may lean towards it, whereas another may lean away from it or not see the same value in it. Truth is, we're all different and we all have our own tastes. And the other truth is, rejection is inevitable. Maya Angelou, talking to Time magazine in 2015, put it this way. Perhaps because of my long history as a dancer, actress, and writer, rejection is something with which I am all too familiar. For every accomplishment, there were 20 rejections. A dance company thought my style was incompatible with theirs. A casting director found me lacking. An editor considered my writing too fanciful, or too plain, too abstract, or too concrete. I could go on for hours. In the end, though, only one attitude enabled me to move ahead. That attitude said, rejection can simply mean redirection. So how do we redirect? Poets get strings of rejections. Personally, I've waited 6 to 9 months for a magazine response, and I open my email in the morning and see that dreaded word, rejected. And then, later that night, just before I go to sleep, another one barrels into my inbox. These rejections can sting no matter how the day is going. If you're having a bad day, they can make that day feel even worse. If you're having a good day, it can knock you off your perch and make you feel pretty low. But it's good to look at rejections as opportunities. Sure, they don't feel good, but there are things we can do to use them as fuel and to move forward with more. In Mary Ruffle's prose poem, To a Magazine, she wrote a poetic response to rejection. I am rejecting your request for a letter of rejection. One must reject everything in order to live. That may be true, but the rejected know another knowledge. That if they were not rejected, heaven would descend upon the earth in earthly dreams, as an infinite flowering of all infinite forms would form a silveresque film over our sordid history, which has adventitiously progressed through violent upheavals in reaction to rejection. Without rejection, there would be no as we know it earth. What is our ball but a rejected stone flung from the motherlode? The rejected know that if they were non-rejected, a clear cerulean blue would be the result. An endless love ever dissolving in more endless love. This is their secret, and none share it save them. They remain, therefore, the unbelieved. They remain the embodiment of heaven herself. Let others perpetuate life as we know it. That admixture, the amalgam moon existing in delicate balance, such as it is. Alone, the rejected walk a straight path. They enter a straight gate. They see in their dreams what no one else can see. An end to all confusion, an end to all suffering, an Hassalian mist of eternally good vapour. Forgive me if I have put your thoughts into words. It was the least I could do for such a comrade, whose orphan signs reach me in my squat hut. 6 rules to overcome poetry rejections and how to use them to your advantage. In the last few months, I've developed some rejection rules. So here are 6 rules to overcome poetry magazine rejections and use them to your advantage. Rule number 1, go easy on yourself. If you get a rejection, you need to treat yourself with kindness. It never feels good to get the rejection, but you submitted the work in the first place. You decided to take on the vulnerability and take on the responsibility of getting your work out there into the world. And when we get a rejection, it asks us to look at ourselves, to maybe have to change something or to go through something that's difficult, that will only lead to us growing. So even if you don't feel like it at first, do something for yourself that's soothing or caring. Make a cup of coffee, run a bath, go for a walk, talk to a friend or a loved one, maybe even laugh about it. Rule number 2, remind yourself that submitting is part of the job of being a poet. I know it's less sexy to refer to poetry as a job or as work, but it is. Writing and editing poems is only a small part of this job, as is reading the poems of others, attending readings, conversing with other poets, sharing. The business of submission is a job in and of itself. If you get rejected from your submission, it's not personal. Editors aren't out to get you. Your poems may just not be the right fit for them. Or perhaps you misread or didn't follow a magazine's guidelines, and that is certainly something to make sure that you do every time that you submit. Think of it this way. You have friends that love certain songs, and they swear by them, and when you listen to them, they don't click with you. And the same goes the other way round. You have songs that you love that other friends are like, it's not for me. The same is for poems, and the same, unfortunately, is for your poems and my poems. Not everyone is going to love them. Not everyone is going to like them, in the same way that not everyone is going to like us. It's a fact of life. But the truth is, it's a job. We've got to keep going, we've got to keep sending them out. No matter how hard the rejection may be, we have to keep plugging away. Rule number 3, remind yourself that the magazines you submit to have so many submissions to get through. I've been on the editor's end for smaller publications, and even then, we received over 100 submissions with 3 to 5 poems in each submission. That's getting up to around 400, 450 poems to read. There's a team of 2 or 3 of us. It's a lot of work. Sometimes when you're reading through submissions, and you don't want to admit it, but sometimes you're tired, other times maybe you're not in the mood for a particular theme, sometimes something that doesn't click then may have clicked 6 months later due to your own personal growth or circumstance changes. We all have not just different tastes, but different places that we are in our life, and different poems will speak to us at different times. So you don't need to take it as a rejection of you. It's a rejection of the poems. That isn't necessarily speaking to the worth of the poem. The poem has inherent worth for the very fact that you wrote it. Perhaps with editors, there were some themes that they were more drawn to, that they were reading, and they opted for those themes. Perhaps an editor read your work while they were tired. Perhaps an editor read your work when they were just not in the mood. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they weren't distracted at all, and they were really inside your poem, but there was just one thing that they didn't quite get. And perhaps they were just drawn to something else that day, that month, that minute, that they decided to publish instead. Maybe it came down to just 2 poems, your poem and another, and there was only so much space in the magazine, and the editor really loved both and couldn't decide, and they flipped a coin. Who knows? The point is not to take it personally. You are not being rejected. Just the poems are. They're taking the poems and they're handing them back to you so you can house them where you wish. Rule number 4, seek a growth mindset. All rejections are an opportunity to grow. You can see rejections however you like to see them. You can see them as something that's incredibly painful and the worst thing in the world and you're never going to recover for it. Or you can see it as a blessing, a chance to get better, a chance to challenge yourself and your work. I mean, where would you be if everything you were writing was getting accepted and people were falling over in the streets telling you how brilliant you were and how your poems are going to completely change the entire world and how you saved them? That is probably not going to be all that helpful or realistic. Even though it stings, we should put our egos to one side and see it as something that we can use to make ourselves better, to improve. Every single day is a chance to improve as a poet, and that may be looking at the poems that had been rejected. That can be reading more poems or other poets that you admire, or reading about poetry by others. All of these different things that we do are only going to sharpen our skills and make us better at poets. So see the opportunity within the rejection for something to grow from. Rule number 5, reread each rejected poem. After a rejection, especially if you sent your poem out months before, you have a chance to open it again and look at it anew. Now, when you're looking at your poem, there's a series of questions you could ask yourself. Is everything working? Is the rhythm uninterrupted, unless, purposefully interrupted? Is the tone consistent? Have you used the best verbs in all the best places? Are the line breaks exactly where they need to be? Does the poem end too early, or does it end too late? Are there things that can be cut down or expanded upon? Is there enough at stake in the poem? There are a lot of questions that you can come back and ask when you look back at a poem that's been rejected, and maybe you can find a reason that it was rejected that did have something to do with the poem itself and did ask you to, relook at it and to decide whether or not you want to change something in it. Now, you may feel like all the poems that come back in the rejected packet are complete and it just wasn't for the editors, which is perfectly valid. You can send them back out if in their current form if you like. But I think it's a great practice to reread them to make sure that they say exactly what you want it to say. And often, and I've experienced this myself, when I get a rejected poem back, I do end up editing it. I do end up with all the new skills that I've learned since I submitted it and since I last worked on the poem, being able to put it into it, to flesh it out more, to change it. So again, to speak to the rule we just spoke about a growth mindset, you can also apply that to the poem itself and to grow and nurture and improve the poems that were rejected. So ask yourselves those questions and more, make the changes that are needed, and then you can make the decision to send them out again. Rule number 6, the final rule, and my favorite rule, which has served me very well recently. Whenever you get a magazine rejection, send 2 submissions out afterwards. That way, you are doubling your output. You're straight away enacting a sense of defiance. When you get the rejection, rather than take it in and go, oh no, this is awful, go, okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to multiply the output and increase the chances of acceptances by doing that. Generally, submissions is a numbers game. Of course, you need to have the poems well written. There's craft, there's skill, there's emotional honesty with yourself. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. The more that you send out, the higher the likelihood of acceptance is. The last thing I want to say is that getting poems published in magazines isn't everything. It can feel like our whole worth and weight is on these poems and the validation of somewhere else as we seek to, as a lot of us say, find a home for the poems. But the poems, by the nature of existing, already have a home within you, and I'm sure within people that you share them with. It's extremely nice if a poetry magazine or a literature magazine says yes to one of your poems or some of your poems, but getting acceptances is not the be-all and end-all of the poetry journey. In conclusion, it is not you getting rejected. Yes, rejection can hurt. Our emotions and our egos are so tightly bound up with the poems that we produce and send. When we send them out, it requires a vulnerability. It requires us accepting that we might have to feel that rejection and we might have to feel the pain of growing that comes as a result of it. The rejection is not an attack. it's okay. Take a few breaths, do something nice for yourself, and perhaps follow some of these rules. But what do you think? What are some of the things that you do to overcome rejections? How much stock do you place in the acceptances and rejections of magazines? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more about poems, poetry, craft, and other writing tips, click like and subscribe. And if you think you know someone that is dealing with rejection within poetry, perhaps share it with them. Thank you for tuning in, and happy writing. That admixture, that amalgam. How do you say that word? Amalgam. Rule number two. I should do that. Did I do that for number 1? Rule number 1. Okay. Rule number 5. We need an outtake, so it'll be fun. You can choose to see a rejection as a blessing, or you can... I was completely distracted by that as well. There was a bird that was just running outside on a beam, I believe, and its shadow is casting on our curtain. Anyway, action.
Wait, no, we're back with the camera. Let's give me a nice cut line. 3, 2, 1, action.
I don't know what cut line means.
I don't know either. I think I made that up.
Yeah, you're putting that in the video. Goodbye.